Yeah. Yeah. How in depth do you want to be? Yes. So a bit about myself. My name is Bella, and I'm a game programmer for a video game company. A game programmer is someone who essentially writes instructions for a computer to create a video game. So that might be writing instructions to put together assets and to make a computer do cool things to make a fun experience for a player. I actually jumped around a lot as far as what I wanted to do with my career. I spent a lot of time at uni jumping around between degrees before I just happened to take a game programming course at university. Only because a friend of mine hassled me to take the paper so it could go forward for the summer, and I just discovered that by chance I really liked it and decided I was going to do that for a career. There are a lot of different roles in game development. So for example, there's game designers, there's UX designers, there's artists, things like that. And we all sort of collaborate together to create a concept. Fundamentally, the concept is generally decided on by the game designers, and then the rest of the team will collaborate to try to make that happen. I don't get to make the final decision, but I do have a lot of input as a programmer on what might be a good design. Like often game designers will suggest a concept that, as far as the actual tech implementation, would be a nightmare. So as far as that, I do get to have a lot of say in terms of, hey, great concept, it's going to break the game, let's not do that. Or how about, I see what you're trying to achieve with this, what about this version instead that works with my tech requirements without compromising what you wanted to achieve with this idea. It definitely also depends on the team that you're on and who you're working with, but my team is very collaborative. We all really like making sure that everyone is contributing. Before I started working in game programming, I was working in theatre tech. I've definitely found there have been challenges in both theatre tech and game programming due to the fact that I am a woman working in a male-dominated industry. So far, I've found that game programming has been much easier than theatre tech was. I found that theatre tech, it's a very old industry. It's been around for a long time, and it is quite set in its ways in a lot of aspects. I think there's a lot of stereotypes about the different roles in theatre. You know, if there's a woman in theatre, you'll usually assume that you're an actress of some kind, or, you know, a performer, or maybe that you're a producer or a director. A stat a friend of mine once quoted me is that I think it's about 5% of theatre technicians are female, and I definitely felt that. When you go to the smaller theatres, you know, you'll often have a lot of female techs, but usually the most experienced people are men, and also particularly outsourced companies are pretty much always men. I don't think I've ever seen an outsourced company where they've got, you know, more than one woman on their team. It's very uncommon, and I definitely felt a lot of basically bigotry based on my gender, people being very condescending towards me. I think I got called Little Miss a couple of times. Someone who was working at the theatre I was working at assumed I was an actress and not the tech, but in reality all the actors were guys and I was the tech. They went over to talk to the actors to ask them about tech requirements. I was like, no, over here, you know. And that was hard, and that really prompted me to decide that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I know that it's definitely a thing that the more you stick at something, you know, the more women there are in a certain industry or any minority, the easier it is for people later on to come through and you know, join that industry. But I also just didn't want to be dealing with that, you know, for the rest of my life, so I decided to leave that and go into tech, ironically, because tech is also known for being like that. But I've also definitely found that tech has been a lot easier to deal with. I think it definitely depends where you're working, and I'm lucky in that my company is really trying to move forward in that regard. It's getting better, but it's still a slow process, and you still definitely feel that expectation when you're the one woman, or one of very few women as a programmer. You feel like everyone's making an assumption about how women programmers are on the basis of how you act, so you feel like you can't fail. But I've also had a lot of support from people in the industry, and I think it is generally trying to get a lot better. The history of game dev is, you know, white, straight men, and that's just it. We need more women, we need more people of colour, we need more LGBTQ plus people. We just need lots of different representation. It will improve the games that we make. You can definitely tell when a dev team is entirely, male, based on the way that they depict women in their games, perhaps, or the way that they, dress them. There's a very distinct, this art is designed to represent men the way that they want to feel represented, and this represents women the way men want to see women represented. You can see that in games a lot, and it is improving, but I think representation of a lot of people will improve so much in game dev. It's also a time thing. I know that one of the bigger problems is just that it's hard to actually hire people that aren't white straight men, because people that don't fit that demographic get pushed out at a much earlier age. I recently went on a trip and spoke about game dev and game programming to a class of kids that were on average 10 or 11. Like, these were all kids that were interested in coding and development in general, and there were 30 kids in the class, 5 of them were women. And that's at age 10 or 11. Like, it starts really, really early. That applies to every minority that's not being represented. They just get pushed out earlier and earlier because they don't have that support and encouragement to go into game dev. So I think the best thing we can do to actually improve that is looking at changing things at an earlier level, really getting in there early and encouraging people that wouldn't otherwise be encouraged to do it, and show them that they can do it, that there are people that they can feel represented by in the industry already. Yeah, I think that would have the biggest impact. My advice for someone who wants to join a male-dominated industry where they feel they might not necessarily be represented is to know that just because an industry is male-dominated doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of people in the industry who are willing to support you and want to see it get better. You're not always fighting an uphill battle. I definitely don't feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle at all. I'd say that the vast majority of the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis want to see that part of the industry change. And I feel really supported, even though I am in a sort of strange place being, a female programmer, because it's not common at all. Most likely, if you pick a good company in particular, you will feel quite supported where you're working.